Imagine a tide, not of water, but of people, a human wave moving with a force and an urgency that defy our understanding. This isn't a movie scene. It's daily life in a place that throbs with chaotic energy and astonishing resilience. That place is Bangladesh. To understand Bangladesh, we have to forget a lot of what we think we know about space, about order, about the limits of what's possible. And the epicenter of this reality, the overcrowded, beating heart of the nation, is its capital, a city that lives constantly on the edge. Welcome to Dhaka. With a metropolitan population that has already surpassed 23 million people, Dhaka isn't just a city, it's a living organism. Chaotic, overcrowded, and constantly in motion. According to the World Bank, it's one of the fastest growing cities on the planet, drawing in around 2,000 new people every single day. People who arrive searching for a better life, only to find an environment that tests human endurance every second. The most visible consequence is traffic. In 2023, a report from the TomTom Traffic Index revealed that Dhaka has some of the slowest traffic in the world, where a 10-kilometer trip can easily take more than half an hour. But numbers don't do justice to what it feels like. It's a three-dimensional puzzle of cars, buses, motorcycles, and, of course, the ever-present rickshaws. It's estimated that more than 500,000 of them move through the streets, forming a true river of metal and color. But the chaos on the surface hides even deeper challenges. The city's infrastructure, designed for a fraction of today's population, groans under the strain. Access to clean water, basic sanitation, and decent housing is a daily fight for millions. In the slums, spreading into every available gap of space, conditions are extreme. An article from the British newspaper The Guardian described these areas as scars of desperate urbanization, where community resilience is the only thing preventing total collapse. This city is the front line of Bangladesh's fight for survival. Every person in this sea of people has a story, an individual reason for being here. But this overcrowding doesn't stop at the streets and homes. It shows up in its most dramatic and most dangerous form in the main mode of transportation that connects Dhaka to the rest of the country. This scene, which has already gone viral around the world, isn't an isolated event. It's a snapshot of a mass exodus that happens during religious holidays, especially Eid, the most important date on the Islamic calendar and a sacred time to be with family, in a way that's very similar to Christmas in the West. There are two major celebrations, Eid al-Fitr, which marks the joyful end of Ramadan's fast, and Eid al-Adha, the solemn festival of sacrifice. For millions of workers living far from home in Dhaka, both holidays mean one thing: getting back to their villages at any cost. It's this family and religious obligation that fuels the chaos. With tickets sold out and demand infinitely greater than supply, the roof of the train becomes the only way home. The local newspaper, the Daily Star, calls it the pilgrimage of risk, a journey where faith and the need to be with family outweigh fear. But the chaos isn't only on the rails. Let's go to Dhaka's Sadarghat ferry terminal. Described by CNN as one of the most chaotic river ports on the planet, Sadarghat is the gateway to the vast network of rivers that cuts through the country. Here, thousands of boats, from small canoes to massive three-story ferries, fight for space in a constant, dangerous dance. Overcrowding, both passengers and cargo, is the norm, and accidents, sadly, aren't rare. Even Bangladesh's skies reflect some of these challenges. The national airline, Biman Bangladesh Airlines, has a complicated history. While it has modernized its fleet, for years it faced criticism and concerns. Aviation forums and customer reviews on platforms like Skytrax often point to issues with punctuality and service, perhaps a reflection of how difficult it is to operate in an environment under so much infrastructure pressure. This constant struggle for space, for a place to move, whether on a train, on a boat, or in Dhaka's paralyzed traffic, forces a fundamental question. How did an entire country reach this point of saturation? The answer lies in the relentless math of its geography and its demography. To understand Bangladesh, we need a comparison. Picture England. Bangladesh has a slightly larger land area. Now try to imagine 175 million people living there. England has 57 million. That's the reality of Bangladesh. With just over 148,000 square kilometers, it's one of the most densely populated countries on Earth. more than 1,100 people per square kilometer. The New York Times once described Bangladesh not as a country with rivers, but as a sea that occasionally allows a little land to appear. And that description is poetically accurate. Bangladesh is, at its core, the world's largest river delta, formed by the confluence of three colossal rivers: the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna. These rivers are the country's lifeblood. They deposit sediments that create some of the most fertile land on the planet, enabling abundant harvests that, at least in theory, could feed its vast population. But that blessing is also its greatest curse. This unique, low-lying geography makes the country extraordinarily vulnerable. Life here is ruled by water, and it's on this fertile, overcrowded ground that millions of people found a way to plug into the global economy, through an industry that clothes the world, but also exposes the nation's deepest scars. Take a moment and look at the tag on the clothes you're wearing right now. There's a good chance it was made here. The garment industry is the backbone of Bangladesh's economy, accounting for more than 80% of its exports. It's over 4 million people, most of them women, working in thousands of factories that supply the biggest fast fashion brands on the planet. That industry has lifted millions out of poverty. But at what cost?
There has been another horrific incident at a garment.
In 2013, the world watched in horror as the Rana Plaza factory complex collapsed, killing more than 1,100 workers. The disaster, covered extensively by outlets like the BBC and Reuters, was meant to be a turning point, forcing global brands to take safety seriously. And there have been improvements. No doubt. New safety agreements were signed, but the pressure for low prices and short deadlines is still relentless. Investigative reporting from organizations like Human Rights Watch and the Clean Clothes Campaign continues to expose exhausting workdays, wages that barely cover the cost of living, and crackdowns on unions. The monthly minimum wage for a garment worker in Bangladesh, even after pay increases, sits around 12,500 Dhaka, just over $100. It's barely enough to survive in the expensive industrial cities. The contrast is brutal. Clothes sold for hundreds of dollars in luxury storefronts in Paris or New York are made by women fighting just to feed their children. These women are the engine of a ravenous global system. And while they face a daily battle inside the factories, outside, an even greater and quieter danger is moving in, threatening to swallow not only their jobs, but their very homes. If there's a true frontline in the global climate crisis, it looks like this. Because of its low-lying geography and extreme population density, Bangladesh is classified by the United Nations as one of the countries most vulnerable on Earth to the impacts of climate change. This isn't a future threat. It's a present devastating emergency. According to NASA data, sea levels in the Bay of Bengal are rising at an alarming pace. Estimates suggest that by 2050, around 17% of Bangladesh's territory could be underwater, displacing roughly 20 million people. The term for them is climate refugees. They're farmers watching saltwater push into once fertile land, making crops impossible to grow. They're fishermen whose coastal villages are being wiped out by cyclones that keep getting stronger. A report by The Hindu, a major Indian newspaper, documented stories of entire families in southern Bangladesh who lost everything, forced to leave the land of their ancestors behind and migrate into Dhaka's already overcrowded slums. That internal migration feeds the same overcrowding cycle we saw at the beginning. Every family that arrives in Dhaka fleeing the climate crisis increases the pressure on infrastructure, on jobs, on the city itself. It's a perfect storm. Environmental vulnerability and economic pressure feeding off each other, creating a cycle of poverty and desperation. And that cycle exposes just how fragile an economic miracle can be, no matter how impressive it might look at first glance. In recent years, economists and financial outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times have been talking about Bangladesh's economic miracle, and the numbers really are impressive. The country has maintained one of the highest GDP growth rates in the world, outperforming neighbors like India and Pakistan at various points. Extreme poverty has dropped sharply, and social indicators, like life expectancy, have improved. But behind the shine of those macroeconomic statistics, the reality for many people looks very different. Inequality has grown. A small elite has gotten richer, while millions still live in a state of extreme vulnerability. The informal economy dominates everyday life for most of the population. Street vendors, rickshaw drivers, construction worker. People working from dawn to dusk with no real job security, no retirement, and no access to credit. On top of that, corruption remains an entrenched problem. In Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, Bangladesh consistently ranks near the bottom, and that shows up in daily life, from having to pay bribes just to access basic services, to public funds being siphoned off in major infrastructure projects. This daily fight for survival against the forces of nature and the failures of the system could easily break a nation's spirit. And yet, the people of Bangladesh find strength and cohesion in something that goes beyond economics and politics, an identity deeply rooted in faith and in an ancient culture. To understand the soul of Bangladesh, you have to understand its faith. The country is a republic with an official state religion, while also protecting other religions. According to the most recent census from the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, around 91% of the population is Muslim, making Bangladesh the country with the fourth largest Muslim population in the world. Islam arrived in Bengal more than 1,000 years ago, brought by traders and Sufi missionaries. It spread peacefully, blending with local traditions. That heritage shows up in a form of religious practice that, for most people, is moderate and tolerant. Hinduism, practiced by around 8% of the population, has even older roots in the region. Before the partition of British India in 1947, coexistence between the two communities was the norm. But partition, splitting the subcontinent along religious lines, left deep scars and created minorities on both sides of the new border. Today, Bangladesh's Hindu community is vibrant, but it faces challenges, including discrimination and land appropriation. Even so, festivals like the Muslim Eid and the Hindu Durga Puja are often celebrated with a strong sense of community. And beyond them, there are small but ancient Buddhist and Christian communities, adding even more layers to this cultural mosaic. This rich and complex culture, shaped by centuries of history, faith, and adversity, shows up in its most vibrant, most accessible, and, to foreign eyes, most controversial form, in the most basic and essential act of all, food. Forget luxury restaurants. The real taste of Bangladesh is here, on the streets. It's an explosion of spicy, sweet, and sour flavors. A cuisine built around riverfish, rice, and an endless variety of vegetables and spices. But it's impossible to talk about street food in South Asia without addressing the topic that dominates viral videos and tourist concerns: hygiene. And here's an important correction. Even though many of those videos go viral as India, this is a reality across the entire region, including Bangladesh. For outsiders, the conditions can look shocking, but dismissing it as simple carelessness ignores a much more complex reality. As an article on food sociology from the University of Dhaka explained, street food is, above all, about economic survival. Vendors operate on razor-thin margins and often don't have access to basic infrastructure, like running, drinkable water. So they develop their own methods, like using the heat of cooking to sterilize food. It's a food system born out of necessity, one that feeds millions of workers at a price they can afford. The local population, exposed to these microbes since childhood, develops an immunity that foreigners simply don't have. So what we're seeing isn't neglect, it's adaptation. It's human ingenuity finding a way to survive and even thrive under the hardest conditions. Bangladesh is a country of extremes, chaos and resilience, vulnerability and strength. A nation that stands, at the same time, on the front line of the climate crisis and at the center of the global industrial economy. A people facing challenges most of us can barely imagine, and doing it with dignity and an inspiring spirit. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and check out what's on the end screen for more content like this. Next week, I'll be back to uncover another corner of our complex world.